topic on the agenda today will be our Analytics Insights Lunch and Learn session. So today, we're really excited to bring you a technology that's really changing the way our customers are approaching analytics, and really happy to walk you through that today. Before we jump into the fun stuff, I wanted to give a little bit of background on eCapital Advisors as a whole. My name is Ryan Kohler. I'm one of our practice leads on the analytics side of the house. And within eCapital itself, we've been around for over 20 years now and have delivered well over 500 successful implementations across the board. The way our company is structured is we have a strong presence on the enterprise performance management space with a variety of vendors and technologies there. And we also have an analytics side of the house where we focus heavily on data engineering. We have a data science team. And most recently, we actually have a RPA, a robotics process automation team as well, that's delivering insights for all the customers that we partner with. We also have kind of a pillar that sits in the middle, which is our advisory services team, where we have expertise that's very strong in a variety of industries. And we certainly like to partner those folks with our technical implementations to help drive as much value for our customers as we can. At the end of the day, though, what we're really focused on is enabling the customers that we work with our people, our process, and most importantly, our technology that we bring to the table here to really help change that culture shift in the organization and help promote that curiosity with data. So with that, I guess I will pass it over to Matt here and let Matt introduce himself. And then towards the end of the session here, we'll get into a product demo with Chris Dobie.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking some time off at lunch here today on Thursday afternoon, or as my kids started calling it a little while ago, Friday Eve. I think that's pretty appropriate. So I've been using it a lot more just in conversation. As Ryan said, my name's Matt Engstrom. I'm new to eCapital Advisors, been here for a couple months. I'm the Incorda Business Development Manager here at our organization. So I'm dedicated to our Incorda practice, and I work really, really closely with Incorda themselves on an everyday basis. I promise you, we will get down into the weeds of live code and demo, and given the demo gods and demo gremlins, something will probably break somewhere along the way, but we'll roll with it. But before we do that, I want to set the stage a little bit and talk about the why and the what we're trying to do. And this is all about decisions, the decisions that you have to make as individuals or as organizations on a daily, weekly basis, and the information that you use to make those decisions, and how timely and how accurate that information is, and how that can dramatically impact the outcomes and the effectiveness of those decisions. Now, to illustrate that, we're going to take a step away from business for a minute. And I'm going to put my baseball coach hat back on, and we're going to talk through a couple scenarios here. So put yourself in the batter's shoes here for just a minute. Ball's coming at you, moving 90-ish miles an hour, and you've got some decisions you have to make. The first one you got to make is, are you going to swing or not? And then if you are going to swing, you've got to make a couple more decisions in really, really rapid succession. When do you swing? How do you time it? And then where do you swing? Because pitchers can do some pretty fiendish things with the way baseballs move between the pitcher mound and home plate. Now, as the batter, you've got a lot of information before that pitcher even started their windup. You've had a report, basically, that you could read. You got a scouting report on that pitcher, so you know what they're capable of throwing. There's the in-game situation. What inning is it? What score is it? How many outs there are? Who's on base? There's decades of baseball conventional wisdom that feed into this. So as a professional hitter, you've got an educated guess about what that pitcher has thrown. Now, in some cases, the guess is all that it is, because I'm going to get a little nerdy here, but I will come back to this and come back to business in just a minute. If the pitcher's throwing a fastball or a changeup, those are really, really difficult pitches to tell apart, because they're both thrown with the same arm and the same wrist motion. Tiny little difference in the way the ball is gripped takes about 10% off of the speed of the changeup. As the batter, you can't tell. You got to guess. And if you guess fastball and the pitcher has thrown a changeup, this is what can happen. You start your swing, you swing, and then the ball goes by. By the time the ball gets to you, the bat has already wrapped around the backside of your head, and you can't do anything about it. Now, this particular example, Johan Santana was the pitcher. And remember this number, in the peak of his career, his whiff rate, the percentage of swing and miss that he was able to get batters to do, was north of 20%. Remember that number. Luckily for the batter, throwing a good changeup is a really, really difficult thing to do. Not many Major League Baseball pitchers rely on it the way that Santana did. Most of them will work with a combination of fastball and curveball. Now, as the batter, this is good for you because those two kinds of pitches are thrown with different arm motions and different wrist motions, and the batter can see that. So in addition to the report that you read before they even started their windup, you've made your educated guess, the pitcher goes into their motion, and right before they let go of the ball, you get a last split second refresh on that report, and you can tell, did they throw a fastball? Did they throw a curveball? And you can make an adjustment to that. So in spite of the fact that balls can do this kind of thing, depending on what the pitcher has thrown, you've altered your guess, you've verified what you thought they were going to throw. You can make an adjustment to it. And as the batter, that greatly improves your chance of success. Across baseball for more than 10 years now, the average whiff rate is less than 10%. So getting that last split second refresh on the report basically cut your error rate in more than half on that decision-making process. Okay, back to business. Why do you care about this? How does this relate to what we have to do in business? When we spend our time talking to customers in general, because we've got multiple practice areas, we don't just work on Incorda. Over the years, we have heard very common complaints coming from multiple different sources. Too much wasted ETL, extract, transform, and load. Basically, what's happening when we bring the data into our analytics solution, there's a lot of work that has to go on to pull it out of the base information sources. It has to be transformed, it has to be flattened, it has to be summarized, it has to be reshaped, it has to be aggregated, and then loaded into an enterprise data warehouse so you can actually start running reports on it. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. It alters the shape and the amount of the data. You're not looking at the actual raw data in all of its glorious detail. You're looking at the stuff that's in the data warehouse. A couple of other problems that we hear that are closely related: slow data refresh times, poor query responses. Those are kind of tied together. If what goes into your data warehouse takes 2 or 3 days to refresh, you're looking at analytics reports from that are based on old data. Or poor query responses. If you're going to run a new query and have to come back in 20 minutes or a half hour or something like that to look at the results of that, that's a problem. It impacts the speed of your decision making. The last two of these things are also kind of interrelated with each other. We hear about no actionable insights. What that means basically is that the insights, the information that you're getting out of those reports to help you make the decision doesn't really tell you anything new. It confirms maybe what you already knew, which isn't bad, but it doesn't help you actually make changes or alter your path towards a better outcome. And the lack of self-service is tied into that as well, because if I get a report that doesn't tell me what I wanted to know, and I don't have any self-service capabilities to make alterations to that query, I have to go back through my whole programming loop basically to alter that query, get the answers back on that one. Maybe the answers raise more questions with me, and instead of fixing it myself or making changes myself, I have to go back through that loop again. So there's a lot of time that gets spent in that process of trying to refine the results and get at the actual insights, the answers that we need to help us, or to help us make those decisions. And that's all stuff that the Incorda solution can help adjust. So because Incorda, and we'll get into the demo here in just a minute, because it can pull in data from multiple sources, it can do it at full granular detail, can do it at a much faster basis without all of the ETL coding and ETL code maintenance that goes on behind the scenes. We can really improve the quality of the decisions that we're making because we're looking at current, accurate, reflective data that helps us get where we want to go. Another thing that really we've seen coming out of this is an increase in curiosity. We've had customers tell us this, and Forrester has done a total economic impact survey for Incorda, and this was raised by their research as well. But organizations are discovering a greater level of curiosity. It's a culture shift with the way questions are asked and answered. Now, prior to the implementation of Incorda solution, users were not even bothering to ask certain types of questions because they knew that they wouldn't be able to get answers to those. Incorda makes it easier to ask questions, easier and faster to get answers, much easier to explore the what if types of scenarios and lead to places that are kind of unexpected and kind of hard to predict. That's a really hard thing to measure from an ROI perspective, but that's really where a lot of the big value of this can come from. And it also lets you challenge the status quo because you can explore those what if scenarios. You can start looking at assumptions, and maybe you're going to verify them, or maybe you're going to prove that those assumptions are wrong, and you're going to have to make some changes or can make some changes in the way that you run your business based on the new insights and the new information that you get out of this. So the innovations that spark by these Incorta projects that we've delivered really kickstarts those culture shifts that we see in organizations and that they tell us about at the end of those projects. We're going to skip off of slides at this point, and I'm going to pass the microphone here virtually over to Chris, and he's going to dive in with an actual demo of Incorta. If you've got questions that come up during this, you can put them out in the chat, and Brian and I can keep an eye on that and do interruptions if we need to, okay? So I'm going to stop my sharing. And Chris is now up. Here we go.
All right. And can you see the Incorta screen here?
Looks
Yeah,
good.
I got it.
Got it. Perfect. So thanks, Matt. Thanks, Ryan, for kind of kicking things off here. And thank you, everybody, for joining over lunch. No precious time here, definitely. My name is Chris Doby. I'm an analytics consultant on the Incorta practice here at eCapital. Been here going on about 2 years now, and prior to that was in the analytics space with IBM. So, certainly have gone through the paces in the analytics world, but really have enjoyed working with Incorta and working with our clients to really unlock those actual insights and really increase the speed to insights that they get with Incorta and with it being kind of that end-to-end analytics solution here. So what I'm going to do today is just kind of walk through kind of a full end-to-end demo of Incorta, all the way from that data acquisition phase all the way to kind of the dashboarding phase as well. So let me just log in here quick. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of give you a preview of kind of what we're working towards at the end of the demo here. So just to give you an idea, we're going to be working with Contoso Electronics, which is a fictional electronics retailer. And really the business question and kind of thing we're after here is understanding what our year-over-year performance looks like and what that looks like year to date. And then also bringing in some external data as well. So really being able to kind of quickly augment the data that we have, within our ERPs or in our data warehouses, wherever that may lie, but be able to bring in some of that external data to really augment the information that we have. So we'll kind of get a company view, and then we'll dig into some additional transactional details. And then, as I mentioned, break down some of the external demographic data as well, just to augment the data that we already have. So this is kind of where we're going to end up, but I'm actually going to start over kind of on the top right here. We're going to start at that data side and work our way back towards actually creating these dashboards here. So let me hop over to the data tab here. And the first thing you're going to see are the different data connections that we currently have set up. So you can see we have 3 SQL Server databases tied into Incorta here currently. I'm going to be using this top one, this Contoso Retail source. So I can just test that connection, make sure we're good to go for today. Also, real quick, I'll just hop into the edit area of that source as well. So you can see pretty simple here, pretty easy to connect up to a data source. Some basic credentials in that JDBC string is really all you need. And then I'll also highlight here just some of the other built-in connectors that Incorta has available here, right? So you're going to see some of your common databases, whether that's MySQL or Oracle or DB2 or whatever that might be. Some of those online data stores and web services, and also having the option for things like a custom SQL connector as well, which I know we've used in the past when we're connecting to some more legacy type systems as well. And then real quick, just the other side of the data here is also having the ability to bring in flat files. So I mentioned bringing in that external data. So what we have here is just an average gross income by zip code file. This is just IRS data we were able to pull off of a government website. Quickly load up into Incorta, and then we'll show you how we can tie this back to our existing data and just to get some different views on what's going on within our business. All right, so we have our data sources kind of set up, and we know that the data is here. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is to create a schema. So the schemas are really an organizational tool, allows us to group different tables and relationships together, do any transformations or augmentations to that data if needed. And again, just kind of keep it all in an organized fashion. So you can see some of the existing schemas that we have out here, but for the purposes of the demo, I'm just going to kind of recreate and do everything from scratch here. So I'm going to go ahead and open the Incorta Schema Wizard. And let's call this Contoso Sales. And then we're just going to select that Contoso Retail data source and hit Next. And then what Incorta is going to do is it's going to go through and analyze that data source and actually allow us to kind of browse through it and understand what's available to us and what we might want to bring in. So I'm just going to hop into the database here. Here are all the different tables that are available to us in the database. Not a ton of tables here, but when you get into a scenario where there are hundreds of thousands of tables, certainly being able to search is a welcome function and makes things a little bit easier. But since we have kind of a smaller section of tables, I'm just going to go down the line here and select the ones I think I might have interest in. So certainly going to want to know the sales channel. Let's get some of the geography information so we can focus on the US where we have that income data. Want to know the product and product category information. Let's bring in the store information, and then we'll bring in all the sales transactions here as well. And then you'll notice as I selected each one of those tables on the left, on the right-hand side, we're going to get some information about what's contained in those tables. So first of all, the source column and column type, we're going to want to leave that alone. Really, the idea here is to be able to bring in all the data in the source shape. And then from there, we're able to work with the data and kind of create the views and dashboards and business views that we need to make that self-service easy and really enable those report and dashboard creators. But you'll see on the right side here as well, we also do have the Incorta label and Incorta type as well. So for instance, like with sales amount, if maybe in my division, we call that revenue, can certainly make these changes here as well. Again, we maintain that data fidelity back to that source column, but are able to kind of give it a cleaned up name just so we know exactly what we're looking at there. So I'll just go ahead and hit Next. I'm going to kind of keep the data types and everything as is. And then the last step before I have kind of the base schema created here is I'm going to keep this checkbox checked. And what this is going to do is Incorta is actually going to go through those tables, try to understand kind of what keys and relationships exist, understand the uniqueness of those keys and where the data should flow and try to create those connections for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Create Schema here. Then you can see we brought in our 7 tables and it created 6 joins. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to load this data up. So I'm going to do a full load. Obviously, this is the first time we're loading the data, so we want to grab all of it. But you did see that option for an incremental refresh as well, which is really helpful, especially if we have these big 100 million or billion row transactional tables. Not having to load that every day or multiple times a day, but just being able to grab those new rows in a matter of a couple seconds or a couple minutes is really helpful, especially with data that needs to be updated regularly and often. So let me click into just the data diagram here, just to kind of show you what we're working with, right? So here are the 7 tables that I brought into the schema, and then each one of these arrows represents a different join or relationship between the tables. And remember, I didn't have to manually set these. Incorta was able to go in and see, obviously the channel key is going to match up, the product key is going to match up, et cetera. But again, also understand the kind of the directionality that data needs to flow as well. So we're all kind of flowing down into that transactional data, and that's the most granular data set. So let me give me that just a couple more seconds to finish loading here. Should be close. All right, and that is finished loading. So you can see we're at about 3.5 million rows on those 7 tables that loaded in just about a minute here. So at this point, in theory, we could go ahead and start to analyze this data, start to create some dashboards. But I want to set up just a couple other things that are, again, going to allow us to kind of augment the data that we see and augment the insights that we're able to get out of it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to connect this fact sales table back to just a dates table that we have stored in Incorta here, which is really just a collection of kind of date attributes. So, things like month name, quarter name, things like that. But to do that, I need to join it on a specific date. And looking in this table, I see I just have this date key, which is actually a timestamp. When we're creating those relationships, we want to make sure that the data types match. but I don't want to lose this timestamp. That timestamp might be helpful down the line or in a future use case. So instead, I'm going to create what's called a formula column here. You can just call this date. And go ahead and open up the formula builder. And as this opens up, what you'll see is on the left-hand side, here's all the tables and fields that are available to me in that schema, but do have the option to bring in some other tables and schemas as well. Here's the formula editor in the middle. And then on the right side, we have the different functions that are available to us and the variables that are available to us. And what I really like about the function aspect of this is when you click on a function, it's actually going to give you kind of an example and a summary of what that function does, which is really helpful if you're not sure, exactly how to use a function or if it's going to do exactly what you need. You get kind of in plain English, the explanation right there. But for this one, I'm just going to use this remove time function. I'm going to search for that date key. All right, and then just like that, I've created that column. That's now a date column, not a timestamp, and I can join back to my dates table. So I'm going to go ahead and just establish that join here. So I'm going to hit new, select new join. I'm going to join back to that fact sales table and choose that date key that we just created in the formula column. And then I'm going to actually join that across schema. I'm going to go to this date schema, select the dates table, and then join that just on the date as well. All right, so we've created our first kind of additional join there. And now we have some additional date dimensions to group by and just an easier window to see, by time frame how our business is doing. But there's two other kind of augmentations I want to add to the schema here quick before we move on. So the first one is I'm actually going to make a copy of this fact sales table for the purposes of doing some year-over-year analysis. This table's not massive, it's 3 million rows, but you can imagine with really large tables, you need to be a little cautious about, storage and memory space. So what I can do is I can actually just create an alias of it, and that's not going to duplicate any of the data, but it's going to allow me to kind of treat this as a separate table, still with all the same data, but treat it as a separate table and allow me to do that year-over-year analysis. So let's call that fact sales last year. And I'll go ahead and hit done. And then you'll see that table kind of populate at the bottom here. We still have the 3.4 million rows in that table, but you'll notice we don't have any joins set up yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and recreate the joins on this table to match what we had on that original facts table as well. So if you remember from that initial data diagram, there were 3 original joins there, and then we added the one to the date. So I'm just going to recreate those here. First to channel. All right, there's one join done. Next, we're going to go to the store. And then third, we can go back to the product dimension. And then the last join I'm going to make here is, again, back to that dates table. I'm just going to select rather than joining on the date, I'm going to join to the year ago date, which again is just going to offset everything by a year and allow me to do that year-over-year analysis, kind of using the current time frames. All right, so now we have our dates set up. We have our year-over-year analysis kind of structure set up. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add one more table here. So here you can see some of the different options we have for adding a table. Like a SQL database would be the most common, just query right to the source system. But in this case, I'm just going to go to the file system, look in my local files, and select that average gross income by zip code file that we had loaded up in here. Go ahead and add that table. We'll keep the same name. And then the last thing I'm going to change here, I'm just noticing that the zip code in the flat file that we have is an integer. I happen to know in the store dimension that we have that we're going to join this back to, that is a string. So I'm just going to change that here. Go ahead and hit done. And then I can go ahead and load up this table. And that should be quite a bit smaller than the whole schema here. So it should just take a couple of seconds to get that loaded up. And it looks like we're done with those 28,000 rows. So then the last step here is just to join that back to the store dimension again. So we can get, for each of our stores located in a zip code, we have the average gross income for that area. So we're going to select that table we just added, join it together on zip code, and hit done. And then real quick before I move on from the schema here, just going to go back into the diagram here. So you can see we added a little bit of complexity here. Obviously added this alias table, nice highlighted in orange just to differentiate it from the others. And then you also see this dark gray box around the dates table that we joined to, just indicating that we're going across to a different schema to grab that data here. All right. So our data is loaded up. It's all the relationships are made. So now the final step, kind of before we get to that dashboarding phase, is to create a business schema. And a business schema is similar to the schemas we were just working with, in that it's kind of a collection of tables and fields. But in this case, we can kind of clean it up a bit, create the views. The tables are views that are going to make sense to our report creators. So let's call this Contoso Sales BV. And it'll make a little bit more sense once I start adding some views here. So I'm going to add a new view, and then I'm just going to go out and grab the data that I think I'm interested in bringing in and exploring today. So I'm going to bring in that dates table, and also going to bring in the whole Contoso sales schema that we just created as well. And then I can just start creating some of my views. So here's where we can really start to organize some of the data and make it really easy for that self-service. So when you're looking for a specific use case, you can just hop into that business schema, and the fields that are going to be of interest to you are ready to go, and you can just start creating insights off of them. So for dates, let's just bring in the date itself. Let's bring in month name, month number, just so we can sort the month name a little bit better, and we'll bring in year as well. All right. The second view we're going to create here is going to be the demographic information. And so here we have the table, that AGI by zip table that we brought in. Something interesting here, you do have this little eyeball you can click on. Just if you're not quite sure if that's the field you want, you can click that, see where the field is coming from, and also get an idea of what those values look like. And just looking through here, I'm kind of interested in all of those different metrics here. So I'm just going to bring in that whole table here, and that view looks good to go. And then the last two views here, quick, I'm just going to make some sales attributes, just so we can better understand kind of the attributes around each of our sales transactions. So let's bring in channel name. Let's bring in the region name so we can focus just on the US, where we have that external data for. Bring in the product brand and product name. Bring in create this out a little bit, the product category, product subcategory. And then let's just bring in the store name as well. All right. And then the last view I'm going to create here is just some of our metrics. Keep those all together and make them easily accessible for this. So as mentioned at the beginning, just going to be focusing on kind of year-over-year revenue here. So we'll bring in the current year revenue, the last year's revenue, and we'll just modify the names here just so we know which are which. And again, very helpful with the business user. So, obviously we kind of know what these are, nice names that we're working with, but when you have things like a segment or an attribute field or anything like that, being able to have these labels can make it really helpful as far as actually creating those dashboards. And the last thing I'm going to do here on the business schema side is just create a couple formulas, which are going to allow me to just kind of get some, get better insight into how the current year and last year sales relate to each other. So the first one, we're going to go year over year revenue, which is just going to be the sum of the current year revenue minus the sum of last year's revenue. The sum of current year minus the sum of last year's revenue. And then I'm just going to copy this formula just to make the second formula a little bit easier to construct here. So I'll bring in one more new formula. Call that year over year change. And then I'll just modify this formula here quickly just to get that year over year change amount. I'm going to go ahead and save that and hit done. All right, and then you can see, so here's the business schema that we just created. Here are the 4 different views that we made. You can see we're down to about 20 columns here, down from the well over 100 we had in all the tables we started with. Again, just cutting down on some of the noise, making that a little easier for those dashboard creators, those power users to get in and really enable that self-service to explore that data. So I can start a new kind of blank dashboard from that content page, but I'm actually just going to hit Explore Data here. And what that's going to do, it's going to open me up to kind of the startings of a new dashboard here, but it's also going to bring in all the views and fields that we just created in that business view. So again, we don't have to go searching for it. We just hit Explore Data, and everything that was in that business schema is kind of right at our fingertips here. So the first insight I'm going to do, and I'll kind of scroll slowly here just so you can get an idea of the different insight types that are available within Incorta. But going to start off actually just with this rich text editor. And within the editor, I'm actually just going to bring in a logo here. So I'm just going to paste let's copy that again, paste the source of the logo that we have. Let's scale that down a little bit and go ahead and hit save. Call this Contoso year-over-year sales. And then it's going to kick me into the blank kind of brand new dashboard here. So now we're kind of ready to start creating additional insights. But as I mentioned at the beginning, we really want to focus on kind of a year-over-year and year-to-date view. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set up a couple of filters so we're looking at the data that we have interest in today. So I'm just going to apply a couple of filters here. First on date. And typically you'd set this for like a variable. So, you know, it's everything less than this year and this date. But just so we get a little bit more data in here, I'm actually going to select a date at the end of last year. Again, just so we have a few more months of data under our belt to work with. So we'll say, let's change that to less than or equals to, we'll do December 13th. And then we're going to select the year, set that to 2020. All right. And then the last filter I'm going to bring in here is just on that region as well. As mentioned, we have that demographic information that's by zip code in the US. So those are the, you know, to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, want to make sure we're just looking at those US stores and US data here. So go ahead and click done. And now I'm ready to really start creating and digging into the data and creating some insights here. So just going to rename this tab just so we know exactly what we're looking at. And call this the year-to-date summary. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start to create some insights here. So the first thing that we like to do on a dashboard and find very helpful is just to start with some KPIs, get a kind of an overall idea of how the business is doing year over year. So I'm going to select this KPI insight, and then I'm really interested in all of the different metrics we have here. So I'm just going to bring in that whole view and title this our KPIs. And you can see we kind of give a light preview of the data here, but a couple of things I noticed I just want to clean up here quickly before we save it off. So obviously that year-over-year change, we're going to change that to a percentage. And I'm going to add a conditional format on that here as well, just so when that's less than 0, it pops out to us a little bit more. We know that's something that might require some additional investigation. All right, I'll do the same for year-over-year revenue with the formatting. When that's less than 0, we're going to make that red. And then I'm just going to change those figures to a rounded dollar just to clean things up a little bit further here. All right, so that's looking much better to me, a little cleaner, and these negative numbers are going to jump out to us. So go ahead and save that insight. And then I'll just drag it up next to the logo here again to clean things up a little bit. All right. So can add a couple more insights to kind of this overall year-to-date summary view as well. So next, let's add a pie chart here. Let's look at the revenue breakout by channel. So we're going to group by channel, look at current year revenue. Call that current year revenue by channel. All right. And then next, because we're looking at year to date and year over year, I want to get a kind of a sense of how those figures look as it relates to time. So I'm going to select a line time series here. Let's look at both the current year revenue and the last year revenue. And then we're going to start that at a month level. I'm just going to sort that by the month number so it doesn't go alphabetically. And then we'll allow that to kind of drill in through to date as well. So call this year over year revenue by month and date. And I'll show you just a second kind of how these insights start to interact with each other. I just want to add one more insight to this kind of summary tab here quick, just to give us some detail and help us understand, what transaction make up this $2.18 billion revenue number that we're seeing. So we're going to add one more insight here. Going to look at current year revenue. Let's bring in the date of the sales. And then I'm just going to bring in all of the attributes that I had brought in to that business view as well. We'll call this a sales detail. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a total on the bottom here, which will just help with kind of the data sanity check, make sure we're comparing apples to apples when we look at the kind of higher level insights as well as all this transactional level detail as well. So I'll save that off. Remember, we had this $2.1 billion revenue number at the top. And then down below in this detailed table now, we can see the 562,000 transactions that make up that $2.1 billion revenue number. And then also as I start to interact with these insights as well, right? So maybe I'm interested in the store channel, and then I see a kind of a big year-over-year gap here in October. So I want to understand if that's a couple days, or as it turns out in this case, it looks like just the month of October as a whole, we were underperforming there. But again, you can see everything else on the dashboard start to filter down. We're down to 33,000 rows, but again, we still have that $112 million revenue number tie out with all the transactional details kind of down below it as well. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that as far as kind of a company-wide view. How are we looking year to date and year over year? But now I'm actually just going to duplicate this tab just to save me a little bit of work. I want to kind of maintain the logo, the KPIs, and that transactional detail on the bottom there. But here I want to really kind of dig more into the store and product attributes. So we'll call this the store and product summary. And then again, I'll kind of leave the logo and the KPIs here, but modify the insights so we don't have too many duplicates kind of throughout the tabs here. So rather than channel, maybe I want to break that out by the product brand. All right, and we have a few more brands here. I think it's a little redundant to have the legend there as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off just to keep things clean. And then we'll just change the title. All right, and then I'm going to modify this time series graph as well. Rather than looking at kind of a time dimension, a month dimension, let's change this to, let's say, a column chart. And then here we can start to bring in some of the product information. So we're going to start at the product category level, go down to the subcategory level, and then finally to product name. And then you can see the product categories are filling in here alphabetically. I'm just going to sort those so it's going to go highest to lowest in terms of current year revenue, just so we get a better kind of visual understanding of what our top performing, product categories, subcategories, and products are. So I'll get all of those sorted. And I'm just going to limit this down so we kind of have a max of, let's say, about 15 different categories at a time. And update the title. All right, I go ahead and save that insight. All right, so I already have some kind of views deeper into the transactional detail that we have. And again, we're able to kind of drill down, into those product categories or even brands. And then, as I mentioned before, right, we see the detail table is going to update to match our KPIs, and that's also going to work across tabs too, right? So as we kind of drill into different products or product categories, we can go back to kind of that company view and understand, for laptops, for this brand, kind of what do we look like year over year and year to date. All right, and the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add one more duplicate. And here I'm just going to bring in some of that external demographic data as well, right? So we want to augment the data that we already had available to us in that data source. with something that we're able to go out and get, whether that's, public government data, like in this case, or we have a lot of clients that kind of subscribe to different data services and get external data that can be really relevant to their business, whether that's weather data, whether that's COVID data has been really helpful in the trying times and being able to spin that up quickly and get some insights on it. But for this case, we want to get an understanding kind of what we look like, what the demographics look like for each of our stores. So I'm going to change that to a column chart. And rather than brand name, I'm going to look at it by the income bucket. And we'll just sort that by the income bucket order as well. So those go lowest to highest. And we'll bring in last year revenue here as well. And then very quickly, we can understand, for each of our stores and where they're located, what does the distribution of our revenue flow look like? And, here you can see very clearly, kind of obviously in this $50,000 to $75,000 bucket, that's going to be kind of our bread and butter of our business, but also have a couple spikes in this and, the higher income range, as well as just below the bread and butter as well. And then I'll tweak this insight as well. For this one, I'm going to pull up one of the newer insight types that Incorta has implemented here called a Sankey Diagram. And this is really great for understanding kind of the flow of different transactions or a supply chain or revenue in this case. So again, we're going to look at revenue, but I want to understand, from those income buckets, what product categories is our revenue really flowing into? So call this revenue flow by income bucket and product category. And then let me just remove some of the filters that I had enacted there. But what's really interesting here and what you can see is as you hover over the different income buckets, it's actually going to show you kind of where that revenue flows. And that will work in reverse as well, whether that's, I'm interested in computer, interested in where those revenue buckets are coming from, can kind of get a really clear view there as well. And as I jump into some of these income buckets and product categories, again, the same theme's going to remain true, where we've added this other tab, brought in this data table that was not native to our data warehouse, but still able to start, grouping by, for the stores in that $50,000 to $75,000 average income range, what does my store and product summary look like, as well as what does kind of my company summary look like as a whole. So a lot of flexibility there, and really the sky's the limit as far as bringing in that external data set. Mentioned, weather's a huge one for a lot of industries, and in the COVID data as well. Being able to kind of be flexible and adapt with the times is something that's really great. But it doesn't stop there, right? I mean, there's a lot of data science and machine learning capabilities built into Incorta. And really the sky's the limit as far as kind of where we go from here, whether that's kind of building up some of those machine learning capabilities or connecting to something like a Tableau or a Cognos for some enhanced reporting, past what can be done on the dashboards here. But really the sky's the limit, and really happy at any point to schedule some whiteboarding sessions to kind of go through and understand, with the data that you have, what business problems could we solve and how quickly we might be able to do that. So certainly, reach out if you have any questions. I know we'll be opening it up here shortly, but as you run out of time, please reach out. We're happy to get on the phone or hop on a Zoom meeting and explore deeper to whatever areas you have interest in. So with that, I think we can open it up for questions here. Happy to kind of dive deeper or revisit anything I went through so far, but really just want to make this an open discussion, understand what things everyone out there can relate to, any questions you have, and really how you see this, how you could see this, fitting within your business.
Thanks a lot, Chris. We did have one good question, I think, from the Q&A throughout your presentation. Didn't want to interrupt you, but I thought we could touch on it here too. So I did answer it in the chat, but the question was around kind of data profiling while you're going through selecting tables and views as you organize your schemas. So just real quick for the group here, the way I answered this in the chat was because we're not transforming the data as it is brought into Incorta, like you may traditionally see with more of that ETL approach. What we can actually do is we can actually query Incorta within Incorta to almost create metadata views as well as data lineage and also some data profiling aspects just directly within Corda. So that is a lot of times a very helpful tool set to leverage throughout that process. Hopefully that answers that question. But if there are additional follow-ups, now is a great time for that.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I cannot see the chat, so I'll have to rely on you here to answer any other questions that do come in.
Yeah, no worries.
Or make them known, rather.
Yeah, it's the only written one that we've got so far.
Yeah, and a couple other ones here. So Chris, you want to maybe touch on options for deployment? Whether in Corda is on-prem or in the cloud. You want to just touch on that real quick, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously, kind of have some deployment options as far as being on-prem or in the cloud. Specifically to on-prem, have some kind of customization options there as well. So typically, what we see with clients is we have Corda split up into kind of two different nodes, an analytics service or analytics node and a loader node that'd be on different servers, but are certainly able to kind of talk to themselves or talk between themselves. And that can be, deployed in a local data center for your company. It can be deployed on your own cloud, really wherever you want. Typically Linux-based can get that up and running, but do have the option for the Corda cloud as well. And in that case, everything's going to be managed on the Corda side. You're not going to have to really worry about the kind of server backend aspect of it, but really kind of go through that web interface, log in and really get the same functionality that we're showing with the on-prem environment here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the nice part there is, regardless of deployment option, it's still the same technology, right? So, as opposed to some other solutions that are out there where maybe the cloud version is a lot, lighter of an option versus, the customer managed on-prem kind of edition. So I think that's really great to see.
Yep. Yeah. A real big benefit of kind of having this nice, easy to use, web UI, right? Wherever the servers are, the UI is going to be the same. And with it being the same too, as far as ramp up time, getting users kind of comfortable, we've seen in a lot of cases within the first day or two at a new client, we're able to kind of get some data in the system and set up. And, it's pretty intuitive for anyone kind of in the space to go through and pretty quickly be able to start creating dashboards and start learning some of the nuances of the tool as well.
Definitely. And Chris, today, I know we were really trying to showcase, Corda's ability to serve as kind of that end-to-end analytics solution. But one question I think comes up quite a bit is, do we have the ability to throw something like Power BI or Tableau on top of Corda and use Corda as a source and leverage an external third-party tool for visualizations? You want to just speak to that real quick too?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of mention, let me hop back to the business schemas here, because I think this is a really useful way to kind of add some of those other external BI tools on top of it, right? So, in this case, we have different fields coming from different tables that we've constructed into these business views. And with something like Power BI, we'd be able to access that business view directly. We don't have to make any of those data relationships in Power BI. It's going to leverage the data model and the relationships that were all built in Corda on the back end to really kind of speed up that time to insight when using external visualizations tools as well. Because again, you're not having to kind of load all the data into let's say a Power BI, model it there, and then you kind of have a one-off use case for yourself that may not be accessible to others. But really lay the core foundation, really get a solid data model behind all the data in Corda, and then that makes it really easy to analyze and get those insights within Corda or those external visualization tools.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I think that's really important to understand, I think, because we recognize that there's certain organizations where, whether it's baked into the culture or simply executive preference, right? Power BI or Tableau or MicroStrategy may be the consumption tool of choice. So easy to have the two tools kind of work together. So I guess, with that, I think, we wanted to give you guys kind of a deep dive, into the technology itself, but recognize that what can be really powerful with kind of evaluating Corda as a potential solution for your organization can be, giving it a test ride, right? So we understand that some of this stuff is a lot easier to digest using your own data. So I don't know, Matt, do you want to maybe throw up that last slide real quick? I'd love to just kind of a quick call to action for everyone that's joined today. Totally understand seeing is believing, right? So we oftentimes will do proof of concepts and kind of pilot programs with the organizations that we partner with. And we feel very confident that we can come in, review some of your current reporting, work with you to identify, what are those key requirements and key pain points that you're trying to attack, develop an agile solution, and go forward with kind of more of a technical deep dive to highlight what that roadmap could look like for your organization moving forward. So if anyone on the phone today is interested in that, I would encourage you to reach out to Matt Engstrom there on the bottom of the screen. And we can definitely coordinate some time to understand some of your priorities and kind of try to launch this analytics boost for your organization.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely. So I think that's all we had for today. Again, I'll echo Matt and Chris's comments. Appreciate everyone taking some time over lunch here today. Hopefully you got to learn during your lunch, and we look forward to reaching out to folks and hearing back from everyone here soon.
All right, again, thanks for attending, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.